When Saddleback Mountain reopened in 2020 after a 5-year closure, the new owners were intent on keeping it the same, but different. $30 million were earmarked for 4 new chairlifts, renovation of the lodge, and upgrades to the snowmaking system. Yes, even at this northerly latitude, Mother Nature can always use a little help. But guns pointed at the heavens aren't anything new around here. Back in the 1950s, an internationally controversial figure moved into town and brought along some very unusual ideas, including the Cloudbuster. The Cloudbuster, a device designed to affect the weather, just one of the many unusual concepts to come out of the iconoclastic mind of Wilhelm Reich.
It looks like an anti-aircraft gun, right? But it's more akin to a dowsing rod.
Wilhelm Reich, an Austrian psychoanalyst, made his name in Freud's Vienna Circle. With the rise of fascism in Europe, he took a teaching position in New York City before moving to Rangeley in the 1940s. Reich established his research center on a hill overlooking Moosluk-Maguntic Lake. Today, Reich's home is much the way he left it in the 1950s and is maintained as a museum. David Silver is director.
He called this building the Orgone Energy Observatory because that's what he was studying.
Reich became focused on what he called orgone, an invisible energy or life force related to Freud's libido or the Chinese concept of qi. He called his new home Organon, and it was often filled with researchers and his followers from New York and beyond, as seen in these images from a recent documentary, Love, Work, and Knowledge, The Life and Trials of Wilhelm Reich. Do you have any sense as to how Rangeley felt back in the day about this sort of odd Austrian man on the hill with his contraptions and his devices?
They were extremely suspicious. He had a German accent. He had people coming from all over the world here. There was this idea that it had something to do with sex.
Indeed, much of Reich's work did involve the mental benefits of sexual health. More broadly, though, Reich was an early pioneer in examining the once novel, now widely accepted notion of the mind-body connection.
He influenced the entire field of body psychotherapy, like core energetics and bioenergetics and Gestalt therapy and things like that.
Meanwhile, Reich's investigations into the mysterious powers of orgone led to his most controversial invention, the Orgone Energy Accumulator.
People have used these for decades, and in Reich's time there were a few hundred of them that were used by patients of physicians who worked with Reich.
Reich believed the boxes, made of layers of cotton, wool, fiberglass, and sheet metal, would concentrate beneficial orgone energy on the person sitting inside. Adherents included writers J.D. Salinger and Norman Mailer.
There's a famous picture of Kurt Cobain sitting in William Burroughs' accumulator.
Then there was Woody Allen's Orgasmatron.
The accumulator is an easy thing to make fun of, and a lot of people latch on to that. The Orgasmatron in the Woody Allen movie Sleeper is clearly based on the accumulator. But I think the jury is still out.
Figuratively, perhaps, but in 1954, the FDA issued an injunction against Reich, accusing him of making false claims about the benefits of the accumulator. It ordered a recall of the devices. Reich was found in contempt and sentenced to prison. His books referencing orgone were burned by order of the court. He died in prison in 1957.
I'm not here to say exactly where he was right or wrong, but he was clearly onto something that interests an awful lot of people.
Indeed, if the government wanted Reich's ideas to go away, it didn't go well. Reichians continue to make the pilgrimage to this hilltop in Rangeley. Conferences on the doctor's work are held every summer.
The accumulator especially continues to have an active following around the world. I've had in the last week 10 people download from our website plans to construct an orgone energy accumulator as a PDF file for $8.50 from Australia and from Germany and from Canada and from California. There's constant interest in this work.
Fascinating story, but I did make an observation. While you were in that museum, you did not take off your hat or your jacket.
Well, it wasn't about Orgone Energy, believe me. It was the fact that the museum is actually closed during the winter, and David Silver was nice enough to open it for us, but there was no heat in there, and it was quite chilly that day. But it was a fascinating look into this fascinating man and how he ended up in, of all places, Rangeley, Maine.
Wow. Okay.